Hello everyone and welcome to this another episode of 3D prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, we built ourselves an asset that we're going to use as a reward for our character. In today's episode, I'd like to take a look at actually having our player interact with that reward and have them react to the reward as well. Alright guys, let's get started. Okay guys, so our cake is in place but it doesn't actually do anything right now. It's set up to be able to do something but it doesn't actually do anything right now. Okay, so we're going to make some changes to both our player character and our cake to be able to have it do something. All right, let's start off by going into our cake. So you guys have built this last week, and currently in our cake we have this sphere collider that is a trigger. And if we've got ourselves a collider that's a trigger, it's going to allow us to interact with objects through code that bang into it. All right, so let's add a component right now. Let's add a component. Let's add a brand new script. And let's call this script, let's call it a cake controller. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And double click on cake and it moves somewhere else. Where'd you go, cake controller? Right here. Double click on cake controller to open it up. This is going to take a second. Did I click on it? Double click. All right, there we go. This will take a second here. All right, Mono Develop's going to open up, obviously on the wrong location. All right, and let's shift and plus in a few times. Where's my plus? All right, there we go. Okay, so the cake controller, basically we want the cake to do a couple of different things. We want our cake, first of all, we want our cake to do something to our character, and we have to decide where we're going to write this code. In this situation, I've decided to add this to my actual cake controller right here. What we're going to do, I'm going to ignore the start function for now, and I'm going to ignore the update function for now. In fact, we're not going to use the update at all, so let's just get rid of that. And I ultimately don't think I'm going to use the start either, but we'll take that out later on. What I want to do is have a situation that when our character bangs into this, we are able to affect the character in some way. So I'm going to start off by writing new code, void on trigger, enter. All right, and this takes one variable. It's my collider, and we'll just call it other. All right, bang and bang. Okay, so basically what we want to do is we want to check to make sure that the proper thing has bumped into this collider. And in this case here, we want it to be our player. So if our player runs over the cake, we want something to happen. So the first thing we're going to check is if it's our player. So if other.tag equals quotation player. We've already labeled our player as such, that tag as such, and I think we already looked at that as well. I'm pretty sure we did. Yes, we did. We looked at it when we did the actual play the video. Okay, so exactly the same way as the play the video, we are checking to make sure that this is actually our player by checking the tag located on that player asset. If it's set as player, then yes, this is the thing that we want to interact with this. Now, what do we want to do? There's a couple of things that we actually want to do. We want our player to go into a reward pose. And we haven't set that up yet, so we'll have to take a look at that in a minute. The first thing we want to happen, the very first thing we want to happen is we want to destroy this object, all right? And what do we want to destroy? We want to destroy our game object. Now, a lot of people are just saying, just say destroy, and there we go, it's going to destroy this object. And that's true. It's going to destroy this object, but our problem is the way we designed our cake, we're adding this script right down here onto cake, as opposed to the top level of cake pickup. And if we simply destroy this object like this, it's not going to destroy the entire root of this object. And we really want it to. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we'll set this up so it's kind of generic, not just going up one level. What we want to do is we want to destroy our game object, and we want to go to our transformer of our game object, and we want to find the root. So I'm going to go gameObject.transform.root, and that's going to move us up to the very top level of our object. Okay. And I want to destroy at that location. I want to destroy the game object. Okay, so basically, it's a kind of a long, drawn-out way of doing it. We're going to find the game object where the code is located. In this case here, it's located on cake. We're going to go to the transform of cake, go up to the root transform of cake, which is the game pickup in this case here. If there was many levels above it, it would go all the way to the top. We're going to the game pickup, we're going to the game object itself, and we're destroying that object. Okay, great. So I'm just going to file save this for now. And if I hit play now, I've moved my cake over here. If I hit play right now, we can see that my game object's in place, my character can run around, and if I run over onto my game object, boom, it automatically gets rid of that object, and the entire thing has been deleted. And that's exactly what we want to occur. Now, the next thing we want to do is in some way affect this character. And let's say this was a point system, you were picking up coins or objects or whatever. Obviously, you want to affect your character in some way. So we're going to make some changes to our character right now to have it affected by the actual game object we picked up. Okay, so there's a bunch of changes we're going to have to make on our actual player as well. So let's go to our player right here. And let's start off with our player. There it is. Let's start off with our animator. Now, first of all, in our animator right now, we only have our idle and our run, which is perfectly fine. That's all we had used up to this point. What we ultimately want to do is add in some kind of a reaction that this character is going to have to the picking up the cake. Okay, and if we take a look at our models right now, let's go back to our model. Here it is right here. We actually already added in one of the beginning episodes this reward pose. Okay, so I'm going to drag and I'm going to drop reward pose onto my animator. Okay, and there it is right there. Now, we want to be able to access this reward pose from pretty much any state. All right, if I'm running and I bang into the cake, I want my character to go into the reward pose. If I'm idle for some reason and I bang into the cake somehow, I want my character to go into the reward pose. So what I'm going to do is, as opposed to having a transition from either of these states or from both of these states, I'm going to go from this extra one called any state. All right, I'm going to right click, make transition, and drop it on reward pose. Just like that. I'm then going to make another transition from reward pose, right click, make transition, and drop it on idle left. So basically what this is saying is from whatever state, and I could add a million more states in here, from whatever state that I was in, I have the chance to go into my reward pose, and I will automatically leave my reward pose and go back into the idle state. All right, and from my idle state, I can obviously go anywhere else. I'm going to add something in here. I'm going to add in the parameters, I'm going to add a plus, and I'm going to add in a trigger. And I'm going to call this, let's just call it reward. All right, and we added a bool for is running before, and this time here we added a trigger. The bool has a state of true or false, and it will remain true until we change it to false, and it'll remain false until we change it to true. Reward is a trigger, which means it'll go on and off, true, false, true, false, true, false, and it'll automatically reset itself. Each time you trigger a trigger, it'll go to true and then immediately back to false. Okay, so the reason why we want to go from any state to a reward pose is if, let's go on here, let's make sure has exit time is turned off, which it is. I'm going to drag this all the way back right there. You can make this as large or as small as you want it for your transition. The reason why I want to go from my any state to my reward pose is if my reward trigger occurs. Okay, and that'll move us from one state to the other. And we can actually preview each one of these from the run. Same thing if our reward is true, etc. All right, we want to make sure a couple of things here. Let's put this back on idle for a minute. We want to make sure a couple of things here. We want to make sure that the reward pose cannot trigger itself. Like, you don't want it to be able to go back and trigger itself. All right, so in the transition, boom, right here. In the settings, boom, like this. Can transition to, well, you can't actually read that. Let's scroll that out. Can transition to self, we want to make sure that is turned off. Okay, it probably is not going to affect us within the game that I've built here, but in most cases you want to make sure, in some cases you want to make sure that the can transition to self is turned off, and that way it can't continuously loop, all right, going back to itself all the time. Okay, so right now our reward pose can be reached from any state whenever we set this reward trigger off. Now additionally, we want to actually exit at a certain amount of time. So in this case, we want to make sure that has exit time is still on. Okay, and it is in this case. Perfect. And we're not going to change anything else in here for now. We'll see if later on we need to, but right now we're going to leave everything else here. Okay, just like that. And we can set a longer transition or something like that if you really wanted to. It's going to be up to you. All right, I'm just going to drag this down so it's like this. Okay, right at the beginning. There we go. All right, so we're going to leave has exit time on, which means we're going to go into our reward pose. We're going to stay in here for our specified amount of time, and after a specified amount of time, we're actually going to shift into our idle state. Okay, that's great. That's exactly what we want to happen. Now, the next thing we're going to do, we want to set this thing off somehow, and we're going to want to set it off using our player. Let's go back to our player. And we've already got an existing script on our player. So we want to actually be able to make changes to this animation state from an existing script. All right, so we're going to make our changes from player movement boom, it's obviously opened up over here again. Let's move this in place. And there is our player movement. All right, and we're going to make a couple of quick changes to player movement. There's a couple of things we want to make sure occur. We want to make sure that our player, whenever we've actually gone into the reward pose, we don't want our player to be able to continue to push buttons to move us around. All right, so we're going to set up a state that we're going to call. Let's add it right in here. Let's just add it right in here. We're going to set up a bool. We're going to set up a bool that we'll call inEvent. inEvent. And we're going to set it to false to begin with. It doesn't really matter, but we're going to set it to false to begin with. And if we're in an event, we want to make sure that our player cannot actually push any buttons. All right, as long as we're in an event, we can't push any buttons at all. If we're not in an event, then we can push any buttons we want. So originally down here in our fixed update, right here, is where we actually accept our input from our player. And we want to make sure that if we are not in events, so we're not, that exclamation mark means not. If we're not in an event, then we can go through and we can accept input from the player. All right, so there we go. If we are in an event, however, if we're in the event state, we want to make sure that we can't push any buttons. So I'm going to say else here. I'm going to add in my braces. And I'm going to set my H equal to 0. And I'm going to set my V equal to 0. So basically, regardless of what we were doing or which buttons we're pushing, if we're in an event, our H, our horizontal and our vertical axes will have a value of 0. Okay, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to happen. Now, we want to go through and make a couple more changes as well. All right, we want to set it up so that there is a function that changes our ability to be in an event. Okay, so let's go all the way down to the bottom. Let's go all the way down here below our animate, add a couple of spaces, and I'm going to set this up as a public function. This is a public, it's a void, meaning it has no return values, or just returns null, or returns nothing actually, I guess. And we're going to call this toggle event. Toggle event, and it takes no input. All right, and I've made it public because ultimately we're going to use this toggle event for other things as well. And basically what I want to do is I just want to toggle our event. So if we are in event, we want to change it to not an event. And remember, oops, in event. And remember, two negatives make a positive. So if we're actually negative at the time, if it's false, we become true. If we're true, we become false. All right, that is our toggle event right there. So far, so good. The next thing we want to do, and kind of the last thing we want to do for now, is we want to set it up so that our cake controller, so our cake, can actually cause our player to go into an event and cause our player to go into their reward pose. All right, so what I'm going to do is right below my toggle event, I'm going to hit return a couple of times, and once again, I'm going to create a public function. And public, whenever I make these things public, it means that other objects, other assets that have a link to this script in some way can access this interface into this object. All right. So what I'm going to do into our actual code here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up so that we have our public void, and we'll call this one here get reward. Get reward, and it's not going to take any. I can take any variables, boom, boom, and boom, put my braces in place. Now, this is going to be fairly straightforward. Whenever our reward pose, whenever we need it, we want our character to go into an event, all right? We have to assume, I'm going to make the assumption that if, and this might not be the case for yours, it's the case for my game, my character has to run and touch the cake in order for this to occur. Or something else has to happen for this to occur. But these are discrete events. Okay, so we can't have a number of events occurring at the same time. I've got discrete events occurring. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle my event. All right, meaning if I wasn't in an event before, then I'm now in an event. All right, so I've toggled my event. And basically what I want to do is, what did I call it? My anim? I forget. Yes, my anim dot, and I want to set my trigger. Set trigger. And I called it quotations reward. Oops, reward. I want to set my trigger reward, and when I do so, that'll automatically move me into this event. All right, so I'm going to file save this. File save. Now, in my cake controller, I now have access to this get reward, and I want to make sure that whenever my player picks up the cake, we actually set this off. So let's go back to our cake controller. In our cake controller, what we want to do, we've destroyed the object, which is great. But before we destroy the object, we want to do a number of different things. First of all, we know that it was our player that set off this event because we have a check in here to make sure it's our player. If it is our player, then we can have access to the player movement code. So what I want to do is player movement. I want to make a reference to our player movement, and I'll call it my player. My player. And we're going to set this equal to, and we're going to take a look at our other, because we're looking at the other object, dot get component. No, sorry, we want to look at our game object first of all. Sorry, other, because we don't want to look at the collider. We're going to look at our game object, sorry, and we want to get component. All right, and we are looking particularly for our player movement. All right, and put my brackets in and my semicolon. Now, once we actually have my player defined, and I'm not going to actually put in any kind of error checking, you guys are welcome to if you want to. Once I have my player defined, I can access my player dot get reward. Bang! All right, and that immediately gives us access to our reward. Great, so let's file save this. File, save, and let's try it out. All right, let's hit our play button, play, and as long as there's no errors, we should be able to start. Now, my player can move around. If I pick up the cake, bam, I pick up the cake. I go into my reward pose. I cannot move, and I didn't toggle the event. So far, so good. What we've done so far is had our player go in, toggle the event so he cannot move. You can hear I don't have access to the movement anymore at all. We want to set it so our player can actually move afterwards. So we've gone in, we've done a reward pose, we've destroyed our object. The last thing we want to do is set it up so that our player can once again move their character around. So we want to use something called an animation event to ensure that our player is moving exactly when we want it to be able to move. So go into your models, find your model, find your player, all right, and make sure you go along and you click on the animations tab. Once you've got that, go to our reward pose because that's the exact one that we actually want to set up to fix. All right. This technique can be used for a lot of different things. In our case, what we want to do is make sure that our character can move again once the reward pose is finished. But you could use this exact same thing to be able to do things like add sound to footsteps. So if you want to make sure that the sound plays precisely on each footstep, you could use this exact same idea. What you want to do, after you selected reward pose, go down and open up this thing that says events down here. Okay, and we have access now, and we can scroll along here, and we can actually see this reward pose going off. Okay, the animation's down there. All right, I want to scroll along this timeline to approximately the location where I want the event to end. All right, at this, I want the event to end right at the very end of our animation. What I'm going to do is use this little tiny button over here, this plus sign, and I'm going to say plus. And when I do, it causes this new window to pop up. Okay, and you can see there's like a little new symbol over here on the timeline. Now, what I want to do is I want to find the object, the event that I actually want to occur. In our case, I'm going to go to my scripts. I'm going to find my player movement code. I'm going to drag it. I'm going to drop it right here. Okay, and that automatically fills in the object that I want to affect. In this case, if I go back and take a look at my player movement code, I've got my toggle event, and that's basically what I want to happen. I want to toggle my event, so if I was in event, I'm no longer in event, and that will give me access to my movement through my move code. All right, so in here, I'm going to say toggle event. All right, I'm going to close it. Oh, I'm going to close this off, and afterwards, I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to say apply. And when I do, that makes this thing here automatically kick in, and it saves it. Okay, now when I hit play, my character can still move around. When I pick up my object, I can't move until after I'm done my event, and then I can move my character around once more. All right, perfect. There is one last thing I want to do, and that one last thing is I want to set it up so that this in some way affects our player. You might not be using cake. In my case, I'm using cake, and I'm tracking the number of pieces of cake that I pick up in my game. You might want to have coins or anything else, and you might want to have it set up so that this affects your player in some way. Okay, the last thing I want to do is set it up so that this reward is being incremented and counted by my player. All right, let's take a look at that. Okay, so the last thing we want to do, let's go into our scripts again, bang, And the last thing we want to do is here in our player movement, we're actually going to add the effect that the cake might have on this actual character. In your case, if you've got yourself a coins that's collecting or something like that, then you can feel free to go through and change how we're doing this. So basically what I want to do is I want to measure how many pieces of cake we've got. Ultimately, the way this game worked is if our player finds 5 pieces of cake, the game ends. Okay? And we're not going to go into ending the game or anything like that right now. For now, we're just going to have the cake count within this player movement, so we're actually maintaining the value, the number of pieces of cake we found. Okay, I'm going to add in a brand new int, and I'm going to call it cake count. Let's call it cake count. Oh, can count. Let's call it cake count, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. All right, our cake count to begin with is 0. All right. Basically, every time we pick up a piece of cake, I want the cake count to increment. That's it. That's all I want to happen. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a public void function down here. Public void function that I'm going to call increment cake count. Cake count. All right, and increment cake count is going to not take obviously any variables, and I'll add in my braces. Now basically all I want to happen is each time this function is called, I want to increment my cake count by 1. So that's a short form, cake count plus plus. Okay, and I'm not going to worry about displaying this on a screen or anything like that right now. Maybe at the end of this series, if you guys want to, we can discuss how to show it through GUI as well, so you can see the number of pieces of cake you've got. In this case, this game was designed so that the player doesn't know that they're going to be killed when they get cake count or whatever. They're not really worried about how much cake they get. All they really care about is that they're now a red citizen and they're running around and collecting cake. All right, so for now, we'll just add this increment cake count in there. I'll file save that. And obviously, in my cake controller, we're going to have to go in and call that function as well. And that's it. All right, so what I want to do is my player get reward. I'm going to hit return after this. And I'm also going to say my player dot increment cake count. Okay, and in both of those situations, our cake count will now increment so we can collect multiple pieces of cake. Okay, and if you want to see that happening, let me just file save this for now. Let me file save this. Let's go back to our player movement for a minute, and for now, I'll make this serializable. Let's make this serializable for now. Oops. Serialized field. And in doing so, it's going to be, I'll just save this, file save. And in doing so, we're going to see it over here when I click on my player. Let's find my player in here. Where's my player? Player environment. Close this. Player, right there. If we go down here, we can see our cake count value right now is 0. When I hit play, bang. Oh, no, I want to turn off my, sorry, I just want to turn off my maximize on play so you guys can keep seeing this. If I hit play right now, so down here is where we're actually seeing this. You can see my cake count is 0. If I move my character, I can move around still. If I pick up the cake, bam, my cake count became 1. Okay, so we are now maintaining the value of coins or rewards or health potions or anything else you've picked up right here within this value. Okay, and I can either leave it serialized or I can take it off. And I don't really care. I'll just take it off for now. Okay. File, save. All right, guys. So that is pretty much it. So that allows us to go through, pick up objects, have it affect our character in some way, keep score, etc., etc., which is really awesome. And that's really all I want to do in this video. We've got one more to do. One more to do, unfortunately. The last thing I want to do is actually set up my arc shot, which was the whole point of this section of the series. All right, guys. That's our next video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know down below in the comments with a thumbs up. A thumbs down is perfectly fine. Let me know why you're giving me a thumbs down. I hate seeing thumbs down with no reason why. All right? So, guys, thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.